Okay, so let's get started. My name is Martin Zygmunt. I'm a mobile and cloud developer from Czech Republic. And in my free time, I'm mostly contributing to Uno platform, which is what I will be talking about today. And I will start up by introducing the problem of cross-platform application development. From there, I will get to Uno platform and show you a lot of examples. And in the end, you will get a homework as well. So let's get started. Cross-platform application development is a big topic today, as many companies want their applications to run everywhere. That's Windows, Android, iOS, and the web. And the problem with that is that to build such a cross-platform solution, you have to choose one of the multiple ways to do that. The classic way, the classic approach would be to build each of the applications separately. So on Windows, you would use C# and Xaml. On Android, Kotlin and XML. On iOS, you would use Swift and Swift UI. And on the web, you would use JavaScript and HTML and CSS. So that's certainly possible, and some are doing it, but it's quite complex because if you want to build the app, you have to build it basically 4 times, and it's 4 times the same thing over and over again. But it's not the 4 times, it's 4 times the effort as well, because the developers, you have to have 4 teams of developers, each proficient in one of those platforms. And they have to build each feature 4 times. Then you have to test everything 4 times. And then you have to also bug fix things 4 times. So it's a lot of effort. And in the end, you end up with 4 different applications, which have to be maintained as well in the future. So you have to keep all those teams of people working on all those 4 applications. So this is certainly possible, but it's not cost efficient and not time efficient. So let's try to improve that. The first improvement we can do is to share the business logic of our application. In this case, we have C# as the business logic language. And on the presentation layer, we will use what's specific for the given platform. So again, on Windows, we have XML, Xaml. On Android, we have AXML. On Swift, Swift UI, and on the web, HTML and CSS. This solution can be done using Xamarin, when we have Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android on Android and iOS. And on the web, we can use Blazor. So this is big improvement because we no longer have to write the business logic multiple times. But we still have to have specific people who can design the application for the specific platform. So we can go one more step further. Xamarin Forms, or MAUI, as it's going to be called in the future, is a solution from Microsoft, which aims to replace the presentation layer with one single language. And in this case, it's XAML. XAML in Xamarin Forms is quite similar to what we know from Windows Presentation Foundation, but it's also different. The dialect has some differences, like different naming conventions and different capabilities. And that's because of how Xamarin Forms is designed. Specifically, when you build your application in Xamarin Forms, you will get a native-looking application on each platform for the same XAML code. So in this case, when you look at the iOS version, you can see the iOS design language coming out of it. On Android, the same thing, and on Windows, you have the Fluent UI. So that's good if you want to have your application match the design language of the target platform, but it's also disadvantages because what you can get out of the framework is basically the lowest common denominator. So if you want to customize something or bring some branding of your company, then you will have a lot of work because you need to specifically rewrite the custom renders of the controls and add specific features which you are lacking. So it's a bit more complicated to actually customize things. Of course, the Xamarin Forms team has recognized this problem, and they brought Xamarin Forms shell and material design into the picture. And as you can see, the difference between Android and iOS is now quite low. You have some small differences in paddings and margins and so on. But in general, the applications now look quite the same. The problem here is that UWP, the Windows version of the application, is not here. And that's because the shell is not well supported yet on Windows. And it's become quite a second citizen of the Xamarin Forms ecosystem. So new features go to Android and iOS first, but Windows only later, based on what community wants. So this is not ideal. And one more problem we now created is that even though we have shared business logic and the UI, we now have lost the web. The website is not supported on Xamarin Forms. And if you want to build the web application, you will again have to go back to the previous solutions and build your UI with HTML and CSS. So this is a small step backwards, and this is where Uno Platform is coming into play. Uno Platform is an open source and free project, which was first open sourced 2.5 years back during build. And Uno Platform was originally built by Inventive, company called Inventive in Canada, Montreal, but now it's backed by Uno Platform as a separate company. This framework allows you to write a single code base that targets all the platforms, so mobile, desktop, and even the web using WebAssembly. And the goal is to mimic the API and Xaml of Universal Windows Platform. So if you're coming from the Windows background, you will be able to quickly learn how to write Uno Platform applications, and you will know exactly how to write the XAML and how to interact with the controls, because it's the same way you would do it on Windows. Just for an example, here is a similar application as I shown on Xamarin Forms. The XAML is basically the same, but if I go to the other platforms, Android, iOS, and WebAssembly, you can see that the UI is now exactly the same as on Windows. So if you want to customize things, you can do it right in the XAML that you write, and it will work exactly the same on all platforms, not just the one that you are customizing. And that's a great thing, especially when you want to have very custom branding for your application and want to have pixel perfect design everywhere. And so we reached our ultimate goal of having one single code base in C# and XAML, which targets Windows, macOS, Linux, Android, iOS, and even the web using one single code. So this is pretty magical, and especially the web part is pretty magical because WebAssembly is a very promising technology that's probably going to be a big player in the future, and many people and many companies are betting on it. And Uno Platform is probably the most complete solution to use on WebAssembly. So it's very worth checking out. But to explain how it all works, let's look at the architecture. On Windows, as you can see, I'm not sure if the cursor will be showing, but here on Windows, you can see that there is only WinUI, which is the Microsoft Windows API layer, and there is no Uno Platform there. So when you're writing Uno Platform application and compile it for Windows, it will just use the Windows native APIs. And you will be not running natively against Windows. On the other platforms, the Windows layer of APIs is replaced by UNO platform. So exactly the same API surface that Windows would offer you, you will find in UNO platform, and the code that you wrote runs against it. So in this case, in case of Android, it runs against .NET, and then there is UNO platform, which provides the visuals and the rendering and the whole logic for the application. In case of the web, it runs against Mono or .NET 5. And again, there is UNO platform, which handles the application logic and rendering. And the rendering itself is done using the platform-specific rendering capabilities. So on Windows, it uses WinUI, on iOS UI Kit, on macOS App Kit, on Android Views, on the web, it uses HTML5 and CSS, and on the other platforms like Linux, it's rendered using Skia#. The reason here is that UNO platform aims to provide you the best of both worlds of the native controls, as well as the platform-specific rendering that's completely customizable. So by rendering using the drawing capabilities on each platform, you get native performance, but you also get complete customizability. UNO platform, as compared to Xamarin Forms, doesn't use particular controls like a button on Android. It actually renders the button using the rendering capabilities, but it's not the actual button on the platform. The behavior and the look of the button is handled by UNO platform itself. And how does it all work is that all the APIs that you would find on Windows, you can find on UNO platform as well, and they have the same namespace. So when you have a button, you have windows.ui.xaml.controls.button, and the same thing is in UNO platform. So when you write your code, you just write the Windows application, and when it's built, UNO platform handles the rest. It just provides the functionality and the logic, and it all just works the same way as on Windows. So that's basically the magic behind UNO platform. And one of the advantages that you get by having this full XAML at your disposal is that all the controls are fully templatable and stylable as well. So a simple button is no longer a simple button that has a text like on Xamarin Forms, but it's a button that has arbitrary content. And you can put anything in there, including a text, including an image, or a layout control that contains various other controls. You can have even nested buttons inside of a button. So it's completely customizable, and you are free to do whatever your imagination allows you to. So I've talked a lot, but now let's show a demo, because that's the most interesting thing in the end. So I will launch Visual Studio, and I will show you how to install UNO platform for the first time. So when you click the Extensions menu and go to Manage Extensions, you should be able to find UNO platform by searching here. So this UNO platform solution templates is basically all you need to get running. When you install it, you will get a new set of templates in the Create New Project menu. And the templates are cross-platform app for UNO platform and cross-platform library for UNO platform. The library is when you want to build some self-contained library, but we will use an application template. And I will name it Hello UNO. Okay, let's create it. And what happens now is the template is provisioning templates for all the different platform targets that UNO platform supports, plus a shared project that will contain basically all of your application's code. So as you can see, there is a shared project, which will contain your views, your app logic, and so on. And this platforms folder contains the individual platforms. So there is Droid, iOS, macOS, there's GTK for Linux, Tizen as a new experimental head, WPF for Windows 7, UWP for Windows 10, and finally WebAssembly. All these projects basically contain just the platform-specific wiring to allow you to actually run Uno platform application. But all the important things that you will need are here in the shared project. There is the app Xaml, which contains the actual application and its lifetime. So on launched and on spending and so on. So all the application lifecycle stuff goes here. And there's a main page that is the main page of your application. So just to show you how the application looks now, I will launch this on UWP and we'll see how it looks. So it's just a simple XAML which contains a grid and a text block. And it launches. So we see Hello World, and this is a normal native Windows application. I will just add something more just to show how it works. So I will add a slider. So the problem with IntelliSense in Uno platform is that Visual Studio tends to break things between updates, and a surefire way to fix it is usually to unload and reload the project. So now it should load properly and we should get full IntelliSense, or we will not get anything, which would be a bit sad. Okay, so that's broken. Let me try to unload this again, just to see if it helps. Okay, it seems this update broke more things than I expected. Let me try to open it in the preview, which is usually surprisingly more stable. So let's see. Okay, I can do it like this. And let's try this. So there's actually a very long-standing problem with displaying XAML in shared projects in Visual Studio, and it was actually fixed in the latest Visual Studio preview. So this should actually work much better. Let's see. Oh, it displays now. That's good. If I switch to UWP, now we get the designer as well, and that should be perfect. Oh, let's try this. So we put it in slider, and we should get a preview as well. Nice. So there is our slider, and I will put it into a stack panel with some padding. So here's a slider, and we will have a text block that will have data binding to the slider. So I will use element name, slider, and path value. So this way, when I change the value on the slider, it should be reflected on the text block. Let's see if it works. All right. Changing the value, and the value on the text box changes as well. So this is an example of data binding, which is one of the key features of XAML. And if you ever worked with XAML, you definitely seen this. So this key feature is, of course, available in Uno platform as well. And we can now run the same application on Android. So I will launch this emulator and we'll see how it works. So this is Android emulator running, I think, Android 10. And just to show you, the platform-specific code here is very light. It just contains the native application as the base, which comes from UNO platform, and the main activity, which is used to draw the UNO platform application. But you never have to touch this code. It's just there, and its main purpose is just to bootstrapping for UNO. So this build usually takes a while. So let's wait for it. Yeah. So if you're lucky, we should be seeing the same UI as we have had on Windows, now running on Android. And as you can see, the behavior is the same, as I can change the value, and it's reflected here in the UI. Actually, it has all the capabilities of a mobile application. So when I rotate the screen, I will get this new orientation, new layout, and it all just works the same way as on Windows. When you resize the window, it behaves the same way. But more interestingly, when I slide here and switch the theme to dark theme, you can see that the application automatically adjusted to dark theme and switched to dark theme styles, which is completely cool because you don't have to do anything and your application will automatically support dark theme and light theme switching. And that works across all the targets that UNO platform has. So you get the dark mode support completely for free. So let's now switch to WebAssembly. It's probably the most interesting target of UNO. And let's see how the application runs there. Again, on WebAssembly, we have just a program class, which bootstraps the application. And there are some other things like app manifest to allow for some settings of splash screen and some CSS for custom fonts. But nothing much interesting there. But when we launch the application, you can see it's exactly the same as on Windows and Android, and it works the same as well. And now the cool thing is that this is WebAssembly. So it's not actually using any network to operate. As you can see on the network tab, when I do this, nothing is sent back and forth to the server. It just works on the client. So anything you do runs on the client, and the C# code is also executed there. When I refresh, you can see that a lot of the C# specific libraries like system XML, system, MS-corelib, and so on are loaded into the browser, and it then runs on the client without having any specific network communication needed. So that's this. And to just finish it up, I will also switch to dark theme here. So I can confirm that the theme switching works even in the browser. So again, when your system has set dark theme and your browser is adjusting based on the system theme, you will get dark version of the application in the browser. And it works again in the browser, on a phone, on a tablet, everywhere. So that's that. That was a very quick, simple example, but you can do much more, of course. For example, just to show you some of the templating capabilities, simple button would look like this, where we have a button with a text. But if you want to customize it further, we can do something like this, for example. symbol icon, star, a solid star, for example, and then a text block. So in this case, we have a button with an icon. And if you want to go even further, we can customize the template of the button so it has the same behavior, but completely different visuals. And you can do this by doing a style. So create a button style with a setter for template. And then in the setter value, you can do control template with target type of button. And there you can customize it however you want. So I will do, for example, stack panel, horizontal stack panel, and put in an ellipse with red fill, like this. And next to it, I will put the content itself. So I can use content presenter and bind its content to the content of the button. And voila, we have a very custom button, which doesn't really look like a button, but the point is that this works exactly the same as the original button does. So if I had a click handler on the button, like this, and I had a, oh, that's a bug, but I will do it like here. So I will do a debug, right line. Hello. So when I launch this on Android, for example, we should be able to see that when I click on the button, it actually does output this hello into output. And this same way, you can customize almost any control in Uno platform. Oh, just need to add global system diagnostics debug. This is a very common problem when you use debug on Uno platform, because debug is already reserved on Android by the Android debug class. So instead of writing just debug, you have to actually specify the namespace, because when we would switch on Android, we would see that there is a conflict because the same class already exists on Android. Okay, so if I put a breakpoint here, clicking, you can see that it breaks here and it behaves like a button, even though it looks completely different than the original button. And furthermore, when I go further in the presentation, you will see how powerful these templating and styling capabilities are, because you can completely change the look of everything. Okay, so let's go back to the slides for a moment to show, so I can show you what the Uno UI library actually offers you. You have access to Fluent UI, which is the Windows design language, as well as Material UI, which is more similar to Android UI. You have access to theming, as I shown you, dark and light theme, but also high contrast theme if you want to provide better accessibility for your users. You have complete data templating styling capabilities, so you can customize your application however you want it to look. You have access to animations, visual states, and state triggers, which is especially useful if you want to target multiple different screen sizes. For example, a mobile phone, then big screens like desktop or tablets, or even bigger screens like TV browsers and so on. So state triggers allow you to quickly trigger between different breakpoints, quite similar to what you can find on CSS with responsive design using media queries. So this is a very similar approach. You have full access to data binding And that's not only the data binding, from WPF, but also the xbind syntax, which is compiled binding. So when you use xbind, your bindings are not using reflection underneath, but they are using actual typed access to the values. So that's much more performant and much more secure as you get compile time validation. And you can also use shapes and brushes, again, quite different from what you get on Xamarin Forms, where you cannot just put an image as a background of a control, because there is no image brush, there is just background color. So in this case, you have, for example, radial gradient brush or gradient brush as a background, or image brush, and so on. Finally, you can also customize the look of your application per platform using conditional Xaml. So if you want some specific UI on iOS, you can just use prefix in the Xaml to surface that UI just for iOS and not for the other platforms. To show all these capabilities, I recommend you to try out the Uno Gallery, which is a live demo of most of what Uno platform offers. This web application is, again, WebAssembly application, which contains examples for most of what Uno platform has. So if I go here into components, we have, for example, buttons. And there are examples for how you can style your buttons, and not only for the material design, but also for Fluent design. And you can see that the behavior is different. I'm not sure if you can see it, but there is also a ripple animation that's available on Android. So you have it here, like this. And this is all out of the box. So when you just plug in the material design into your application, all your buttons and all your controls will look like an Android application across all platforms, not only Android, but all platforms, including the web or Windows and so on. There are many other examples like cards or checkboxes. And again, as you can see, the behavior of the control is different across Fluent and Material. And that's because we have the full templating capabilities. So this is just a different style placed on the same control. The behavior is the same, but the visuals and the interaction that the user has is different. So there is a lot of examples. I will not go through them all, but you can definitely try this out and see how the controls that are offered out of the box behave and how you can use them in your application. One of the interesting things is Acrylic, which is a background blur effect, which is available on Windows, but in Uno platform, you can use it on almost all platforms that Uno supports, so Android, iOS, macOS, and WebAssembly. And on macOS, you can even use the Acrylic brush that samples the background from the behind of the window. So you can have basically look through the application with blur, which is pretty cool, and it makes the application look much nicer than just a plain background. All right. So that's this. You can definitely check this out on the website. I will send a link here. There is a question I see. If it's possible to write Uno applications using Visual Studio for Mac. And that's definitely possible. Although the recommended way is to write it on Windows, because on Windows you get the full debugging experience, because you can write your Windows application first, and debug it, use hot reload and so on, and then run everywhere. But you can still write Uno platform applications on the Mac, where you will not be able to debug the Windows version. For the Windows application, you will have to go to Windows. But of course, on the Mac, you can now debug a macOS application. So it's one platform for the other. like exchange for one platform for the other. And the second question here, does WebAssembly just draw everything to a canvas? No, actually it doesn't. It uses the HTML, CSS capabilities in the browser directly. If I go here and, for example, hover over this, you can see that Uno platform generates the HTML and CSS for you. So you don't have to touch this in any way. It's generated automatically. But Uno platform uses the native capabilities of the browser, and in this case, it uses HTML and CSS. There is also a potential that we could use Skia Sharp as the rendering, but that's not implemented yet. That's potential for the future. But this way, we get the native capabilities like text input, for example. So like for a text box, the input itself is using a native input control of the browser. So if I go here, there is input right there. And for browser support is pretty good. It's supported on all browsers that support WebAssembly. And that's almost all except for iOS Safari, which is a little bit funky sometimes and doesn't support all the features. Like the application runs there, but it's not perfect all the time. So we're just hoping that Apple will keep improving Safari so that it runs as well as on the other platforms. Right. Yeah. I will go back. I will come back to the question on hardware on the next slide, actually, because Uno is not only about UI, but it has many more APIs. You can access various sensors like accelerometer, magnetometer. You can use brightness override to change brightness of the screen. You can use geolocator to search for something using GPS. You can use speech recognizer to recognize speech, and so on. So it's very powerful. And I have an example here using in the browser. I had this for a presentation on Uno platform or last year's UnoConf. I actually see that I didn't optimize it for dark theme, so I'll switch. You can try some of the APIs here. For example, accelerometer. I cannot show you because my PC doesn't have accelerometer. But if you open this website on your phone, you should be able to observe accelerometer events. And as you move your phone, you should see the last readings here with a timestamp. And the same thing here for geolocator. You can get the current GPS coordinates and many other things like vibration. Again, I cannot show it here because it's a desktop PC, but on your phone, pressing this button should activate vibration on your phone. And there is a speech recognizer. I'm not sure if this works actually now. Hello. Hello. Actually, I think that's because I'm using Microsoft Edge, which doesn't have recognizer capabilities yet. Let's try on Chrome. It's a quite new experimental API, so it's not perfect yet across all browsers. But let's see here. Hello. So this is speech recognition in the browser. And one of the coolest things is Midi, which is musical instrument device interface. So this allows you to connect a musical instrument to your device, be it a phone, PC, or tablet. I have a digital piano here. And if I connect it to USB, we should be able to see it here to come up here. It should come up either here or here. Yeah, so it's here. So the digital piano that's connected right now to the PC is right there behind me. And when I click this, you should be able to hear that the notes are playing on the piano. And this completely natively running using the MIDI interfaces from Windows. So you just write Windows application. It's using the platform-specific device APIs underneath. So in case of the browser, it's using Web MIDI to actually communicate with the musical instrument and then play the notes. And it works actually both ways. So if I play something there, it can appear here. So it's a two-way communication, and you can write things like Syncfusion for learning how to play on piano. So that's a pretty cool thing, and you can try it out on your device as well. If you have a MIDI-enabled device, plug it in, and you should hear how it plays. So that should also answer the question. The integration with there are some integrations built in, but Bluetooth specifically is not yet, because it's a very huge API and has many caveats. So we didn't get to it yet, but we're definitely planning to support Bluetooth in some way, at least. So stay tuned for that. But in the current version, we have a lot of other sensors like the accelerometer, magnetometer, gyrometer, and even pedometer for walking, like step counting. We have network information. This is pretty crucial. So you can check if there is network connectivity. I can check here. I'm connected. When I switch to, I will observe. I will switch to offline. You can see it's reflecting connectivity right there in the browser. So that's quite capable, and you get a lot of APIs for free just by using UNO platform. You don't have to download any separate NuGet packages for many things. Like even Xamarin Essentials, most of the features you can find in Xamarin Essentials are in UNO platform out of the box. So you can use those across all platforms without any additional NuGet. So that's that. All right. Yeah, if you want to try it out, I will post the URL here as well. This is the URL. All right. Am I actually? Oh, I'm posting it to someone specifically. I want to post it to everyone. The same thing with the gallery. Yeah, that should be better. How does it deal with navigation between screens across platforms and history? So the behavior should be the same as you get on Windows. So one screen is basically a page, which can have user controls, nested user controls, nested pages as well. And the main navigation control is the frame, which allows you to navigate from one page to another. But of course, you can create a shell which contains a navigation view like this. And yeah, this is a quite example, because this is switching between pages in a frame, and the navigation view is actually built in a shell page that contains it and the frame. So this is the way to navigate, and the frame itself supports like back and forward navigation out of the box. And it even supports like a navigation stack, which you can go back and forward in, and you can even replace by a different navigation stack and so on. So it's quite capable. Yeah, so UNO team basically did reverse engineer UWP. So WinUI team is quite supportive of UNO platform, because UNO is bringing WinUI everywhere, from Windows to all other platforms. And the API is exactly the same. So even new releases of WinUI are almost immediately backwards compatible with UNO platform. So we can bring in new controls that they are implementing by just porting the code from their code base. Actually, I can show it to you here. So recently, Microsoft added a control called info bar into WinUI. So here is the code. It's quite simple, and it's written in C++. And what we do is then we take the code and port it into C#. So when I go here into info bar, you can see the layout, even the layout of the files is basically the same. So CS, properties, and Xaml there, Xaml for theme resources, and so on. And when you see the code, you should see quite a few similarities. So here you just replace the const expr with consts. Then there is the constructor, then the overrides for onApply template, and so on. It's exactly the same code, just in C#, and it works. So porting new controls into UNO platform is very simple. We just take the code, copy paste it, rewrite it to C#, and usually that's all we need to actually run it. And that's because all the basics, the like primitive controls and primitive base classes are there, like control and border and grid. And most of the new controls that WinUI adds are just like compositions of those basic controls. So we use that approach to just port new things into UNO by translating from C++ to C#. So that's that. Of course, we are always one step behind WinUI, because when they release a new version, we have to look into that code and port it or update the existing controls to use the new APIs or support the new features like navigation view. They recently added hierarchy support, so we had to port it. And this version of navigation view is just one level, but in the gallery, we are now using multi-level navigation. So this is this nested component. So it takes a bit of time still, but when we have the control in place, updating it to new versions is quite simple, because we just check what were the changes in the last commit, and we apply them to our existing code. And the goal for the future is to actually automate this somehow, so that we can automatically translate most of the C++ code to C# and make some specific adjustments for those parts of code which are not translatable easily or have to be done specifically. But that's for the future. We don't have that in place yet. All right. So I'm back to another demo, actually. So I will go here in the browser to show you an example of a full application in UNO. This is a Channel 9 app, which allows you to browse different categories of Channel 9, watch the shows, and it's basically a better RSS reader for Channel 9, but it's an open source project which anyone can contribute to. And we want in the future to have like support for downloading videos, for fast forwarding, like increasing and decreasing speed, and many other features. So this is something you can even contribute to if you want to, and if you're interested to see how actual UNO platform application is built. But a much more sophisticated example is UNO Calculator. And I will show it to you first on Windows. So I'm sure you have seen this or used this. This is calculator that's built in Windows. If I go, for example, to this, this supports like calculating, converting units, and even some scientific notation and so on. And this application was open sourced by Microsoft on GitHub sometime 1 year back. So Windows Calculator. GitHub. Yeah, so this is the open source version, which is basically a UWP application. So UNO platform team took this source code, made a fork, and ported that to Uno platform. So here is Uno Calculator, which is the same application running in the browser. And it behaves exactly the same. You can switch between different modes, have some scientific version of the calculator. It responds the same way to resizing as the Windows application. And it also has the other features like conversions and so on. So this is pretty cool. And you actually can download this on your mobile device as well. So on Android, on the Google Play Store, it's Uno Calc, also on iOS. And it's probably the best free iOS calculator available for iPad. So I definitely recommend it to at least to try it out, because it works pretty good. So that's probably the great example of a full application running in Uno. This is also available on Linux and macOS as well, but I'm not sure how to download it on Linux actually, but it's there somehow in one of the stores or something. So if you're interested in that, you should be able to find it on the web somehow. So Uno Calc Ubuntu. Yeah, so yeah, it's in the Snap Store. So you can download it on Linux as well. All right. I'll go back here. So as I've shown you already, Uno is closely cooperating with WinUI team and bringing new controls into Uno. So you've seen the navigation view, the info bar, but there are more controls like pager control, tree view, as well as tab view. So there is a lot of functionality that you get out of the box. But Uno is cooperating with others as well, like Windows Community Toolkit, which is headed by Xaml Llama. And this community toolkit contains a lot of useful controls, and you can use those in Uno as well. For example, data grid or this radial progress bar and so on. There is actually a NuGet package, which is called uno.microsoft.toolkit, which you can install, and then you get all these functionalities. There are plans actually to bring first-party support for Uno platform into the Windows Community Toolkit, but that's not finalized yet, so there is a fork for this. And for charting and graphing, there is Syncfusion, which has brought their charts support into Uno platform, so you can make business line applications with like charts and details in the browser as well. And recently, Infragistics has brought support for Uno as well. So they have different kinds of charts as well, some gauges, and this is an example that they created that allows you to pick colors from an image and shows the RGB values, and you can then even go further and zoom in on some of those and so on. So that's pretty cool. And it seems that many companies are actually trying to build third-party control for Uno. So it seems it's getting the traction and support it needs. The question there is there any plan to move from MVVM to MVU, like MAUI? Uno platform is definitely looking into different app models for the future. The limitation here a little bit is that they are trying to be compatible with WinUI. So they cannot directly bring any new syntax support into Uno platform because that would not be supported on Windows. But the WinUI team is as well looking into this. So for the future, I'm pretty sure that there will be support for both MVVM and MVU, and you will be able to pick and choose what you prefer. But the goal is probably for this to be in a like WinUI 4 or something like that, not in WinUI 3, which is coming this year. So you have to wait for it a little bit longer. And here is an example of Uno and Skia Sharp. You can use Skia Sharp in the browser, and you can do quite advanced 2D rendering as well. If I go here on platform.uno, there should be an example, live example here in the code samples. Yeah, here. Oh, so there is a video, but not the link. But you can actually use embedded Skia Sharp inside of Uno applications and do pretty advanced stuff like shaders and bitmap operations, color filters, and so on. And Skia Sharp has now native support for Uno, and so you can easily use it in WebAssembly or any other target that Uno platform has. Right. And for the roadmap, Uno platform is looking into more support for WinUI, so new controls, being on track on WinUI 3 release, so we can have immediate support for it. Actually, there was WinUI Preview 4 last week released, and we have already support for it basically from day one. But when WinUI is released and open sourced, we will definitely look into our existing code and try to port as much code as we can, because as I mentioned before, the existing code there before, which is not open source on WinUI, is reverse engineered. So, for example, the grid, which is not open source yet, that's reverse engineered. And when WinUI open sources this code, we can take this code again, port it from C++ to C# and get exactly the same behavior and exactly the same logic as it uses on WinUI, which will definitely be useful because we will have no differences in behavior and layouting and so on. Of course, there is also work to look into new programming models, MVU, for example, but also like functional approach. There was an prototype of Uno platform running in F#. So there is a lot of things that are actively tested and experimented with. And for example, there is on the right side, you can see an example of Tizen. So Uno platform now can run on Tizen as well. It's just an experimental platform, but we are trying to get full support for it in some of the next releases. And we are even cooperating with Samsung on this. So we should be able to see Uno platform applications running on a fridge in the future. Finally, we are looking into improved tooling, which means we want to have first-class support not only on Visual Studio and Visual Studio for Mac, but also on Visual Studio Code. And the ideal would be to even have a designer experience inside of Visual Studio Code. So you wouldn't have to install the full Visual Studio, and you would just install some extension into code and build your applications from there. And just to prove the point that Uno platform really runs everywhere, this is a photo from Tesla, and you can actually run the Uno platform calculator right in the browser there. So even the Tesla has a capable enough browser to run full WebAssembly application. And there's even support for GPS, for example, as I tested. So you can get geolocation and basically build a Uno platform WebAssembly application that, for example, shows you gas stations. Oh, not actually gas stations, but charging stations for Tesla on the map. So the possibilities are limitless. So if you want to try it out, as I shown you, if you have Visual Studio, you can install the extension, but an even easier way to try it out is on this playground.platform.uno website. And there is a full editor here, which you can live edit and add some things like text box, for example, You can do data binding. There is a JSON payload that you can use to data bind things, some example data. And there are some snippets that you can use, like borders, example borders, and like combo box, and so on. So you can play with it right in the browser. This control actually is the same control that Visual Studio Code uses, and it has even like syntax highlighting support and so on. So that's pretty cool, and you can use it to try it out before you actually install onto your computer. And now for the homework time, I encourage you to try to create an app with Uno and try to do your first Uno application, some basic layout, some functionality, and just try it out, how it works, and send us some feedback if you have some issues or trouble getting started. And if you want to go even further, you can contribute to the project. And there is I wrote a series of blog posts about contributing to Uno and how you can get your environment ready for it. And it basically goes through a step-by-step tutorial how I did my first PR into Uno platform back 2 years ago. So it should be yeah. So this is basically a 3-part blog post series on everything basic you need to know before you contribute. All right, so that should be all I had from the presentation. There is a chance to win. If you fill out this prize draw, you can win a course on Udemy, Introduction to Uno platform. I will send the link here into chat as well. Basically, it's a feedback for the presentation, but you can also win. And that's it.